Hello, everyone. My name is John Rady, and I'm the Global Sales Leader for Prolifics Data and Analytics Practice. Welcome to Prolifics Geek Out Tuesday. Today, we're going to be talking about data privacy, really to provide a deep dive into technology and the pain points that can be eliminated by providing clarity to clients' privacy initiatives. I'm excited to introduce these two gentlemen today who will help us get really geeked out today. Two very close friends and workmates. One, Brian Kordelski, who's the Chief Revenue Officer for Data Sentinel. And then we also have on the call today, Kieran Sirapaneni, who's a Prolifics Data Governance Enterprise Architect. So Brian, just to get this kicked off, I know that there was a recent article in Reuters back on November 22nd. And in the article, Bruce Reed, a former Biden chief of staff, who's really expected to take a major role in the new administration, he was the one who helped negotiate with the tech industry and the legislators on behalf of some of the backers on the initiative that led to the 2018 California Consumer Privacy Act. And many privacy advocates see that law as a possible model for a national law. So, my question is, aside from the national law, which we all think is coming, what are you seeing out there in the marketplace more and more as some of these states continue to pass this type of legislation? Just to get your take on this.
Sure, John. Thanks for the question. I think, from a citizen perspective, everybody that has data out in the space and IT departments and people's systems, I know as a citizen, we all want to have those rights, right, to control our information. And as we've seen with the Global Data Privacy Regulation and the California Consumer Privacy Act and the latest rollout of their CPRA, this looks like it has a good chance to go nationally. And as a national law, it will make it easier for understanding each of these state-by-state laws instead of having to bucket them all into individuals. So we're excited about that. I mean, from a perspective, data is data. Whether we're looking at Californian data or other states' data, it really is all about being able to find and itemize and tag and manage that privacy information, that consumer privacy information. But from our perspective, it's just widening the funnel and doing very similar things to make sure that we take action on not only finding where that data lives, John, but also helping those businesses comply with the processes required to do the regulation, to deliver that compliance mandate, to delete data, update data, et cetera. We have both of those capabilities for the customer.
Not only that, I just want to add one more point here, Brian and John, is it's not just the California private law, privacy as a law that is coming out, but on the similar lines of CCPA, we have states like New Hampshire, Illinois, Nebraska, Connecticut, Maryland, Minnesota, and all of these states are rolling out their state level laws, which go into similar lines of CCPA and GDPR, starting early next year. Yeah,
completely agree, Karen. I think again, you're mentioning all of these states that have regulations. I know, there's many others like Hawaii, et cetera, that have regulations that are out there and they're up for vote to deal with that challenge. So it will get very confusing to deal with each and every state independently because, as we know, the United States doesn't act as a state. It acts as a country in a lot of ways when businesses are run. So any simplification will make it easier for those businesses who have to comply, for sure. So it is an interesting and exciting time.
Yeah, and I mean, they're going to be rolling these things out more and more. I mean, we're seeing it every day, as you both make a very good point around that. So really, Brian and Kieran, this is really for both of you guys. So we know Data Sentinel plays a huge role in data discovery, scanning, et cetera. But what are you guys seeing as the central components that customers need to be thinking about when finding data sources that are risky and the types of data clients should be concerned about?
Among the privacy activities, right, we talked about compliance. Compliance is just one area in data privacy. When we talk about data privacy, we have to think of other things like data loss prevention, right? Keeping the data safe. We have to think about monetization, using data to increase your business and grow your business. We have to think about data governance, managing and taking care of things like critical data elements. So when we talk about a privacy umbrella, it really does contain all of those things. And really, from a solutions perspective, we have to do two key things. There's 10 steps to getting it done, but the two key things that we need to do is find out where that data lives. So find out where that information lives in any and all of your data sources, whether that's an email, a message queue, a photo, an image, inside a structured or an unstructured environment. We need to find that data for the customer extremely fast. And then the second thing we have to do is we have to act on it. So what do I mean by act on it? If you're dealing with compliance, it's putting in the DSAR processes to resolve that for the customer. If you're dealing with data loss prevention, it's tagging and itemizing that data and then putting a policy in place that says, I now need to encrypt this information. I need to control this information for the organization. So it's basically those two key areas, find and act. Under the covers is a lot of technology that do those things very simply, using modern capabilities like AI, machine learning, et cetera. Kieran?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. And absolutely. So the framework around this whole privacy coming is driven by risk, by doing the risk management part of it, right? And if you observe the outcomes of this whole risk management and the data privacy coming out, and if you lay it down around the framework, which actually corroborates to what Brian has just mentioned, you identify the data, you establish the governance principles around the data, you control the data coming in through, you properly communicate the data between different systems, different policies within the organization. And at the end, you actually protect the data. And where this whole conclusion of these 5 different outcomes is going to be a data privacy framework.
Yeah, and I know there's lots of things like performance and classification and things that are important around, some of the discovery and so forth. In terms of performance, Brian, this question is really for you, and Kieran, feel free to chime in. When understanding, lots of clients are talking about enormous, large amounts of data. Speed is of the essence when trying to find where the at-risk data lives. How do you guys accomplish this, Brian, from a speed perspective? And what types of technologies do you kind of employ to be able to get this done quickly for clients?
Sure, John. Speed is of the most importance, and I think if you look at the way data used to be measured and ingested, that would take all of the time, right? For moving data around, or for measuring data and doing all these comparative analyses, you're talking about things that would take days, if not weeks. And really, the technology has evolved, right? We've all been witness to several instances and iterations of technology. And from our perspective, we do things quite differently. We're a younger solution. We've been on the market just under a year. When we look at information, we stream it, right? So therefore, we're order intolerant. What does that mean? That means I can run one stream of data, or I can run 100 streams of data at the same time. So I just deploy my processes in a singular or multiple fashion way, so I can stream data. So if I'm looking at 300 files, I can run 20 of them at once, as an example, and be able to consume that data, tag it, isolate the sensitive data. The other things that we do to run very efficiently is we run as a hybrid system. So we can run on-prem, off-prem, or a combination of both, including multiple cloud variables. And we run as a container. So we containerize our workloads, and we can then process those extremely efficiently. And finally, to put the last geek out session on it, we run on a GPU as well. So for those of you that know technology and innovation and where it's going, this is some of the fastest ways to consume information. And like I said, tag it, stream it through, isolate it, and run policies to resolve it or put it into the processes that Kieran was mentioning about the governance framework.
Absolutely, Brian. And John, if you look at it, the way the data privacy framework, not just framework, but the technology evolution, it is actually driven by the need that is coming in with all the data breaches that we have seen, right? And gone were the days where you can identify the breach and take your own time to identify the risk around that and then put some protection around it. But now the need is that you need to do it real time and act fast. And that is where I believe that the technology and the evolution of Data Sentinel tool in particular, where it is real time and involving the AI methodologies to identify the sensitive data and protect it. I think that's where the next step is going to be, and it's going to lead back once we have the nationalization of the CCPA, and this is going to be the fastest way to go there.
Yeah, Kieran, thanks. Just to add to that, you kind of triggered a point, which is, we can run using AI and machine learning, right? So there are layers to that. There's plain old machine learning where you give it a designated pattern and the machine will go find that one pattern and repeatedly look for that and search through that, whatever data source you provide it. And then we have this concept called deep learning. And the simplest way to understand deep learning is it's a layer cake of multiple machine learning patterns that are produced into one set of logic, which basically allows our engine to quickly look through and run various algorithms against the data as it's being streamed through. And when I say stream through, I mean 10,000 to 100,000 records per second. We're just ripping through that data and analyzing it and letting the machine assist us. We do a very similar type of augmented approach when we classify data. We use fuzzy logic, we use exact logic, and we use some variety of the machine to allow that information, again, to flow 10,000 to 100,000 records per second, and then be able to classify where things are not exactly the same, but they're close, allowing us to provide and build up that evidence that it is in fact some data that needs to be targeted.
And you brought up classifications, Brian. I know that Data Sentinel delivers classifications, based on some of this deep learning and other. How can these be extended? How can they be customized? I know not everybody's environment is the same, and people have different use cases that they're trying to kind of put into place. How do you perform these classifications?
So as I mentioned, we have a whole set of classification features built into the Data Sentinel solution, right? So we classify to tag and to tokenize and to itemize that data so that we can take action on those things, and we can augment this into our dashboard to show you where that data lives. So that's the level of classification we do with both exact matching and fuzzy matching. Now, when you're talking about different vertical industries, classification of what is important data or sensitive data becomes different, right? So if you're a healthcare organization classifying data, you may consider things like treatment codes to be sensitive. You don't want to let those patients' information out when you're talking about how you've treated them. If you are looking at manufacturing organization, you may have other things that you consider sensitive organizational data that you do not want to get out, that you're storing on products and things that you're producing for the industry that you're in. In financial services, that we all know what a credit card number is. It's a very common attribute. However, there's a number of other identifiers and different things for different accounts and for children accounts and family accounts, et cetera, that you would want to add to it. So Sentinel out of the box will come and target your main key classifications, John. But what it will also allow you to do is to tweak those and add to them through bringing in your own different identifiers so that you get to scan the data all at once and add those unique capabilities into the system.
It's all good stuff. It's all very geeky, is it not? It's geeky. We love to geek out on Tuesday.
It is geeky.
Hey, let's switch gears for a sec. So Kieran, you kind of touched upon a little bit on use cases, and the way that we look at a lot of the data privacy use cases in the market, or at least with the clients that we work with, are kind of, it's forced compliance, right? Hey, we need to get this done in a certain amount of time so we can avoid any fines. But it goes deeper than that. Related to that is data governance. Related to that is data loss prevention. Related to that is just understanding our data more fully, and how do we monetize, and how do we eliminate the risk. And those are some of the priorities that we're seeing in the market. I mean, it kind of reminds me of a recent example around Marriott. Just to call them out, they got a little bit in trouble around GDPR, but also had a data loss incident. What other use cases and kind of the looking at it, holistically and overarching, are you seeing around, or what could come out of some of these data privacy initiatives? Brian and Kieran, this is kind of for both you guys to kind of talk about.
Sure, John. I think one of the other use cases that I have observed is more like a data zones, in the sense like, you don't want a person A to see person B's data. And a lot of times that we have seen within the organizations, the way the applications are set up and and set up and design, we have seen that coming out through that the data is being siphoned off, and the objective opportunities where people who are not supposed to see the data have access to that, or accidentally have got hold of the data, whether it is file system or not. So that is another privacy where use cases that where data privacy coming in from more from a zones perspective, right? And an interesting way that we can use this data privacy in the process that Brian just described is production support. It might be funny, but during the batch process, a lot of times we have seen that the batch loads fail because there was a data element within a certain record which is not supposed to be there. And oftentimes in my history, I have seen that the NPI, PII data ended up into a different column. And the way we set up the process and identifying the data actually narrows down the whole production support SLA down to like, few minutes, where you can identify the data, prevent the, not just basically fixing the production issue, but actually preventing the data privacy right there, where we catch it at the source.
That's a really good point, Kieran. We call that active data governance. And I know when we work with Prolifics and Data Sentinel together, we can evolve that to really what you're talking about is data that should follow a data sharing guideline, data that shouldn't be ingested or pushed out of your organization if it's deemed to be data that's not allowed. When we're talking to our customers around this, data loss prevention is key importance, but having data in the wrong hands is going to fall into that, right? So certain individuals that aren't authorized having the wrong data, you talk about data zones, they can do a lot of things with them, right? So the Marriott example John brought up is, they had a GDPR violation, and then they had a data loss scenario. The data loss scenario is because the data got into the hands of someone that shouldn't have had it, and they were a bad actor, and that can happen, people that have controls. So, all of those capabilities around controlling the data loss by tagging and putting in policies to ensure that that data is either encrypted or locked down or protected from specific data sharing environments, all of those scenarios are what we push as use cases, right? So the same concept applies, right? Find the data that's concerning and then do something about it. Create a policy or a process to control that. Whether that's data loss prevention, data governance, compliance, compliance is forced, but you still have to do very similar things, which is find it and then do something about it.
Yeah, it's the use case does not just like narrow it down to being compliant by the laws that the government or the regulators are putting in, but it is more dependent on how the organization functionality also goes through and how the processes are laid out. So there are multiple use cases around that, which data privacy plays a key role.
You're exactly right. And if you look at the analyst community, and I know we all do, even though we're geeking out, right? The analysts have a lot of intent on what's going on in the space, but from a data privacy perspective, most of the analysts out there are saying, look, privacy is part of governance and it should be considered as such. It's become a pillar. No longer are you just classifying and using governance for monetization. You're using governance as control as well. So therefore, privacy and privacy policies must be considered part of that overall program in any organization.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Excellent. Love that. Hey, so just doing a quick time check here, team. So we have about 7 minutes left in the session. I wanted just to double check quickly to see if there were any questions in the queue. Brian, do you see anything there?
Nothing in there yet, John. It is open for anyone that wants to pump one in.
Excellent. So What other areas do you feel customers should be thinking about as they address all of this? I think sometimes people tend to think this is kind of overwhelming. You know, as an example, gosh, I have 300 different data sources. I know data, you know, at risk is residing, whether it's PII or PCI or HIPAA or what have you, depending on the industry. I mean, what other areas, or how do you feel customers should be thinking about this holistically as not eating the entire elephant, but just kind of taking it piece by piece to get a start on it? What's a good call to action there, Brian and Kieran, please?
Yeah, so I think, you know, for most people, it's really prove it, right? They want to see what's the proof's in the pudding, right? They want to see what we could possibly find, what concerns they want it proven out to them, right? It's like the old days in data quality. It was always, my data's fine. It goes through my systems and therefore I'm fine. My data is fine. And we always knew that that wasn't the case, right? Governance was formed on the basis that sometimes there are problems. So when we say prove it, right, you say a good use case is a privacy audit, right? So Data Sentinel and Prolifics have put together a sales play focused on auditing data privacy. And in today's world, it's no longer, you know, gigabytes, it's terabytes, petabytes, exabytes of data. So let's target one of those data zones, to use Kieran's term that we're talking about. Maybe it's an enterprise data lake, or it's an operational data store, or you know, an Oracle warehouse sitting on premise. Let's go after and audit that system and quickly come back to show you a few things, key outcomes of the audit, which are: what kinds of sensitive data do you have within that environment? Should it be there based on your policies? What is the financial risk of that data? We do an aggregated financial risk. So therefore you'll know, should I lose this information or someone come in and hack into my information? There's a financial dollar amount there that you could be maximally fined for it. But also, what is the spread of sensitive data? What do I have on John Rady? What do I have on Kieran Panini? What information do I have out there that you don't want in those specific systems because you broke one of those data zone rules? So this audit is 1 week to 2 weeks, depending on what data we're going after. And we're going to send you a full report of the information and its risk, as well as a metadata extract file that you can use to enhance and augment your existing governance programs or your existing security programs around your risk management platforms.
Absolutely, Brian. I think you brought up a very good point in here, because we have often seen many times in many organizations, I have played around with the data, whether it is through the OLTP systems or creating data lakes, data warehouses, data marts. We have seen that the sensitive data being transformed or transitioned from one point to the other. And the audit plays a key role out there, because how are we trying to transform the data, and then what are the different steps that the transformation is taking place, and then how are we protecting the sensitive data during these transformations, right? And one of the other use cases there is during this whole data warehouse journey, where we have seen organizations creating a master of record, where they're identifying during the entity relationships between two different attributes or two different persons from two different applications, and then you're creating a master record. Now, one of the identifications that they do is using the sensitive data like social security number, or to some extent the address is one of the parsings that they do. Now, when this information goes through the parsing mechanism, how are we trying to protect the sensitivity of that? I mean, we have seen breaches happening in that line as well. So the privacy risk that is coming in through with the data evolution that the organizations are taking place is going to be very protective. And not only that, when we try to create some sample data to train the algorithms during the machine learning process, the analytics journey that the organizations are taking through, we have to be very sensitive that we are not giving them the training data which involves the NPI information or sensitive information. So how do we decompose all of that and then create a data set? So these are different aspects of where the data privacy is playing a key role.
Yeah, absolutely right. And we're even finding privacy data embedded in things like system logs and processes, right? So so being able to scan those types of things and find that information. And I think you bring up a key point, Kieran, and I know, John, this is what Prolifics is made for, but when you're talking about data governance, these are critical data elements, right? They're CDEs, and whether they're an indicator or a name or a combination of such, they can be used to create a unique 360 relationship of a person, but they can also be used, which is for good purpose use, right? Or they can also be used for all the bad purpose use too. So understanding holistically who those people are in your data is key to managing it.
That's fantastic. Yeah, really good point, guys. Hey, so everyone's going to be receiving a recording of this session that joined the session, and then we're going to also forward a way for you to sign up or get more information on this 1 to 2 week data privacy audit. It's a great way for people to get started just in one, data zone that Brian had mentioned to proof out, proof's in the pudding, at the end of the day, and so. To proof out performance, proof out how to classify your data, and how to leverage AI as part of that process. Before I close out here, we have about a minute left. Want to thank everybody for joining. Do we have any questions in the queue that we want to tackle? Yeah, go ahead,
John,
Brian. You want to?
Go ahead,
or Karen, go ahead.
John, I see one question in the chat box, John. How much data do you require at a minimum for the sensitive data audit, and what is the cost of this 1 to 2 week audit?
So the data requirements really is how much can we get our arms around as far as what we deploy on your system, right? So we're going to, if we're going to run on a shared system, we'll put it up on an AWS instance, a Prolifics AWS instance, what have you. And depending on how fast that configuration is, we will be able to tell pretty quickly how fast we can get through the data. If we're going to run it on the client's premise, which is probably likely given their data risk concerns, then we'll need a configuration of a similar size. So that'll give us throughput. This question was from Jeanette. It'll give us throughput on that, so we know in a 2 week audit we'll have 3 or 4 days to execute the process, and then we have to interpret it. So that will give us the answer on time. And the cost for the 1 to 2 week audit, I think, John, we talked about this before, right? It's a $15,000 to $25,000 fee, and it is as a service, right? We're going to roll this out as a service for the customer, so they don't have to configure anything. They don't have to be concerned with anything. They just got to give us access and point us to the data, and we'll get the thing installed and then run this as a service. So really, the outcome of it is the audit report, which will show your risk tolerance and the issues that you should be concerned with, as well as a extractable metadata file that you can use in the future to take action on what we found.
It's a great report, and it's a very a real good way. It's low cost, high value, and very low risk way to proof it out. So, hey, we're about a minute over. I want to thank everybody again. We'll be sending out this recording shortly with some content and information around the data privacy audit. If there's other additional questions in the queue, if you can't stay, we'll answer these and get the recording out to everyone. I want to thank you, everyone, for attending. Brian, thank you very much. Kieran, very much appreciated to both of you. And I'd like to close it out for this Tuesday's Geek Out session on data privacy. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.